So the way this is going to work is I'll flip it over to the K2 folks, Casey and Steve, to walk you through it. At the end, we'll leave a few minutes for Q&A. So queue up your questions in the Q&A window, which you can launch from the bottom of the screen by clicking on Q&A. Put your questions in, and then I will field those to Casey and Steven to answer for you at the end. Feel free to ask them as we go throughout the presentation, and then we'll handle those at the end. We'll be right on about an hour this afternoon. So without any further ado, let me hand it over to Casey Jones from K2. Casey, it's all yours.
Thanks, Eric. And can everybody hear me okay?
We can.
All right. Well, good deal. Well, looks like we're getting a little bit of an echo here from someone on the line. I don't know if you can pause the other participants, but A, thank you for having us today. We're glad to actually get to share more in depth about K2 and how we help organizations leverage their SharePoint investment. We've been members from SPUG since the very beginning, and of course, we're very, very excited to be here today. I'm going to give a little bit of context to K2. This is Casey Jones speaking. I'm over in Fort Worth, and then Steve Boldt, who's my technical peer, who most of y'all know and have seen speak before, will be actually doing a short demonstration for everybody. And I've listed our contact information on the front here. Anybody who's interested in some follow-up, we've done a lot of thought leadership, white papers, those sort of things. It's just Casey at K2. I'm happy to forward those out to anybody interested, but we've got some really good information on forms, workflow, and reporting in conjunction with your SharePoint investment. So with that, why don't we get kicked off? And please feel free to ask questions, and Eric will certainly filter those out to us. So if you're not familiar with K2, or you haven't visited K2.com or seen us in a while, I mean, essentially, we're a business application platform. So we help companies build apps using forms and workflow and data integration to completely automate some of the business tasks at your organization today that may be manual, may be cumbersome, and you need to be able to have visibility into these at runtime. And the way that we help people do that is we create reusable assets with little or no code. So that's a big piece of what K2 is about, is we don't want you to have to write custom code, and be able to connect information, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's on-prem, and be able to access and respond to those applications and forms, whether they're on your desktop, on a slate, on a mobile device, essentially wherever you want to work, and so you can take action on those particular tasks. And the key thing is we need to be able to surface up information for you to do your job. So the right person needs to get the right information at the right time based off of their security level. And the key thing is we want you to keep that data where it lives in those line of business systems. We don't want you replicating that data into K2 system. Leave it where it belongs, and we're allowed to surface that so you can have context around your business decision or approval, or filling out forms, and be able to push that information back to those systems of record so that that data entry only occurs one time, and we're able to update those systems of record. Okay? So when we think of a business app, it's pretty simple. That's surfacing information from one or more line of business applications into a single UI that we call Smart Forms. If you go to our website, you'll see Smart Forms. It has a lot of information on that. And the nice thing about K2 is when you purchase K2, you get the whole suite. So the suite's comprised of forms, workflow, data, and reports. And this is a nice graphic that's indicative of an application that you build that is pulling information from both, your on-prem 2013, perhaps you've got a 2010 environment as well, and then you've got cloud services out there that also you may want to bring into context of a form or a workflow, and they need to be able to surface that on any device. And one of the other key things about K2 is that we work equally well with both your on-prem or your cloud investment. So, we support hybrids. We want you to be able to leverage the technology that you own. We have clients that have 2007, 10, 13. Our technology already works with 16 that's about to be released. But the key is you need one instance of K2, and we can talk to any of those versions of SharePoint that you're using today. So how do we help? You go to SPUG every month. You're looking for ways to bring back technologies or ideas to your business. And there's a couple of key things I wanted to point out. One is that within the context of K2, forms can be used in and outside of workflows. Workflows can be used without forms, and they're not tied to that single SharePoint list or library. The other thing we often find is challenging with the out-of-the-box SharePoint platform is escalations, parallel routing, round robin, rework. I mean, these are all very difficult tasks to do with the out-of-the-box using .NET or any other third party that runs on the SharePoint engine. Scalability. We sit outside the SharePoint infrastructure, so as you start to grow, you're not bringing any sort of degradation to the performance of your SharePoint environment, and that same thing goes for line of business integrations. We have a technology I'll talk about in a second called Smart Objects, and Smart Objects allow us to connect to any third-party system that's out there that basically gives us an ability to access it. And those integrations can be managed all from K2 and can be connected to forms, can be connected to workflows, or both. And the important thing is that these integrations can be used across your applications, and then these become reusable components. So if you're connecting to your SharePoint 2013 environment or 2010, but you've also got SAP and you've also got Salesforce, a non-technical person can now do a drag and drop integration into their form or into their workflow without having to know anything about the security, about the database structure. It allows you to put that power into users' hands to create forms and workflows. The other thing is error handling, and we hear this time and time again on how challenging, once you have a problem in a workflow within SharePoint, how difficult it is to isolate and troubleshoot. K2 actually stops the workflow or the form right where it's at, allows you to troubleshoot it and then continue on. You're not having to start these processes over. And the big thing is that we also aren't limited just to solving SharePoint problems. So K2 can be run with your SharePoint investment, but it can also be used to solve business problems outside of your SharePoint investment. So very important to note, if you have forms and workflow needs that may interface with your PeopleSoft or your Oracle system, we work equally well in those types of environments. So you're going to see a front-end form today. You can see this is in the context of SharePoint. You could have forms that look exactly like SharePoint so that your end user has no idea they're even using K2. We can do that. But the key thing is each one of these different sections is what we call views, and views are reusable. So once you create a view that may be inside into your CRM system as an example, anywhere that you want that view to appear in a form, you basically drag and drop it. These are reusable components, and if you add a field to that view, it now would update any form that is utilizing that particular view. So the idea is that you have a single pane of glass, but you're able to access information from different line of business systems. And our forms are HTML5, so you can view them on any device. And we also have mobile clients that are really robust, tie into cameras, barcoding, voice recognition, geolocation. We've got some really slick controls that go with our mobile apps, but all of this should also be available within your mobile application. From a workflow perspective, these are built via a drag and drop environment. So you're going to have visual tools. You're not writing code to create workflows. They can be very basic, like you see in the lower hand side, which would be more of a SharePoint experience, to much more robust on the right hand side that, these are things that span the enterprise. And these are also wizard-based tools. So whether it's Word or Outlook or Salesforce or SAP, we have wizards to walk you through what information do you want to display, how do you want the security configured. Also, that goes for escalations, how you want to assign to groups and roles. We're tying in to your Active Directory. We could tie into other groups and roles. And the other thing is, out of office, how you want to report. All of that is very, very easy to configure. You're not writing code to do that. And last thing is our Smart Object technology. And I'd encourage y'all, if you're on the IT side, to dig into it. Think of Smart Objects as a wrapper around the information you want to display on a form or information you want to kick off as part of a workflow or update a particular line of business application. It's essentially a wrapper around the line of business systems on the right and the fields or the information you want to display on a form. And once you create this object, it now becomes an asset to you. So that object can be reused over and over, and similar to how views work on forms, the same thing can be tied to workflows or forms with smart objects. So if today my customer feedback is coming from my SharePoint environment as well as Salesforce, but tomorrow you decide to move to PeopleSoft, all you do is change the smart object, and anywhere it's used, it's automatically going to update those forms and update those workflows. It's a real powerful tool, and it's how companies like Kimberly-Clark have rolled out 500 apps in under 2 years. Is because of this reusability and allowing to push that build experience out to the user community. Last is reports. You'll have real-time reporting on what's going on within a business app, which is real-time metrics. Think of the virtual desk, who's it sitting on, who are you waiting for, an approval chain, all the auditing of courses around that, around who touched it, when, where, why. And those same reports are available via our mobile applications. And then most of y'all probably use SSRS or Power View. I mean, essentially everything that we do is built in the Microsoft stack. It's held in SQL. You can write all of these reports out to any sort of reporting service that you want to consume. So we're going to dive into a demo here. For those of you who've been involved with K2 before or been to our website, you're going to notice we actually have 2 platforms available to our client base. I wanted to kind of demystify the difference between the two. So Black Pearl is what people traditionally know us for. That's our enterprise platform with workflow data reports, just like you just saw. And Black Pearl works with any version of SharePoint. It also works and runs completely outside of the SharePoint world. Appit is a cloud-based service. It's hosted in Azure. It works with 2013. It does not work with 2010. It's not meant for an on-prem installation, but it's a application that we host that you consume as a service in a subscription model. We host it for you, but it's purely based at or geared towards the SharePoint 2013 audience. It's not going to be something where you're going to start forms and workflows in PeopleSoft and then bounce around to SharePoint and back. That's really where Black Pearl is our enterprise fit. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Steve, and Steve's going to do a deep dive and show you what the technology looks like from a runtime experience. And please, once again, ask questions. Thanks. So Steve, you can take control.
Thanks, Casey. Alrighty, thank you, Casey. So what I'd like to go through is several different examples of K2 in action from an end-user perspective, and then also from a design perspective, just what is it like actually K2 under the covers building out a process or forms. So what I thought I'd start today is there's a couple different ways we can look at this from a K2 perspective. K2, as Casey mentioned, from an integration standpoint within SharePoint, we can tightly couple both from your Office 365 environment or your SharePoint on-premise. There's the same look and feel regardless of whatever you're using, the same code base. So that allows us to go between both environments if we need to. We're not using one per environment. But the idea here is that I have a seamless approach as far as when I'm interacting with SharePoint, especially from an end user perspective. That's important for users to be able to see what if they spend most of their time in SharePoint, they're not jumping around to different links to forms that might have to reside on like an intranet site or whatever that might be. So with that being said, let me show you a couple of examples first off from an end user, what it's like using K2. So I thought I'd show, as you can see, we're looking at one of my Office 365 sites for SharePoint. I have some different sites that I've created in some list and libraries that I can access. The first one I'd like to take a look at, though, is a vendor contract process. So this particular process lets you be able to submit a new vendor contract. So let's say a vendor has won some type of service, they need an approval for that, we need to sign off that work's been completed, or that this is actually a valid contract. Maybe we need to add attachments that need to be uploaded to SharePoint and so on. A lot of that type of process or just building that out in SharePoint can sometimes be very overwhelming. And then specifically, if we want to go above and beyond just the SharePoint forms that exist, that's where K2 really becomes powerful in what you want to do. So let's take, for example, if we look at this vendor contract list, we can see that I have many different lists and list items. I have different columns that are of different types, and typically when I would click new item, it would take me to the SharePoint form that would allow me to be able to pretty much fill out some information that will be saved to the list. But with K2 under the covers, what we've done is when you start building applications with SharePoint, we can allow you to choose if you want to replace the SharePoint forms with our smart forms. And with that being said, if I click new item, what we're going to see now is actually a K2 smart form embedded within the SharePoint library. We automatically replace that. We inherit all the information from the SharePoint list, but it allows us to start going above and beyond what just basic information that you could achieve through that list. Some examples of this is that let's say that I am filling out this new vendor contract. We got a contract for a new service engagement, so we'll just go ahead and type in services engagement, and we'll put for January 2016. Obviously that's pretty generic, but let's choose a vendor. Now my list of vendors resides in Microsoft Dynamics CRM. Well, right now I don't want to have to flip over to CRM, be able to look up that information, come back and populate that into my form. So what we can do automatically with K2 and using our smart object technology that Casey mentioned is that we can bind that information seamlessly to different controls within the form itself. And with that being said, looking at the vendor, I have a lookup to where I can look up any contract or vendor in my CRM list. And we'll go ahead and do a search for something that starts with the letter F. And so it's going to go out there, and obviously there's a lot of vendors probably with the letter F, but I have one called Fourth Copy. We'll go ahead and select that's the one that we wanted. And you'll notice now on the right side we have account details that populate according to that vendor we selected. Now it doesn't just stop there. K2 doesn't only pull information from other line of business systems, is that we can also update those line of business systems using our smart objects. So in this particular example, and what we're looking at in this account details, this is what we call a view on our form. Now, our forms are made of multiple views, and these views are reusable. So anytime I know I want account details, I can just drop this view on a form, and then I just quickly hook it up to where I can pass in information that I need to populate that. Or it could already have logic built into that, so I don't have to even do anything. Now, I could also maybe add a city information and click the update button, and what it'll do is actually go back and update CRM for me. And therefore, once again, having that seamless approach for the end user perspective is that they don't have to jump back and forth between screens and going to different things. But let's go ahead and just finish filling out this form. I have like an approver here. I could select for APAC for the region, but this happens to be the Midwest or South. So I'm going to go ahead and use the South, which now it changes my approver, just standard cascading drop-downs that is out of the box within K2. I could select whatever type of contract. In this case, we're talking about services, so we'll leave that. And I'll go ahead and put in an amount here. We'll go ahead and say that's $65,000. And you'll notice we can format information and provide validation on fields automatically as well. We'll go ahead and put approval deadline in the future and supply some comments here. And we'll go ahead and save this off, which will actually kick off a K2 process behind the scenes. Now, I didn't click on these tabs, but what these we actually have different tabs to see information about the process or active if there's any archive contracts or anything like that. And also, I could also look at any contact info for anybody that I want to add as well. So now we've submitted that off. We can see that down here we have this new services engagement, and I also supplied a link to what we call our view flow. So one of the things that we have out of the box within K2 is a visual representation of the process at runtime. So we actually have a view into the process where it's at, so someone can quickly see what's going on with that process. We can see where it started. The green shows me the path that it's gone, and the blue shows me where it's currently residing. I can interact with this process by seeing how long it's been sitting at a particular step, if it's finished or not, who the participants are in this case. I've logged in as Roy, who's one of the people that fills out some of this information in this case. And Roy, we can see, actually got a task sent back to himself. I also can see any comments or attachments that have been part of the process and see some statistics around this process as it goes on. Obviously, right now, there hasn't been much going on, but as we go through this specific activity, all this will update in real time. This is something that's out of the box with K2, and I can leave this up and running so we can review this at a later point. And then one of the other things that I have is I have Roy's email open. We'll see that he's received a notification that a new vendor contract for coffee requires his review, and in the amount of the contract that for $65,000. And he could also directly open up his task from his email, or one of the things which we call our smart actions is he can directly respond to the email at runtime just by replying to the email with one of these words, and that'll action the task for him. Now, one of the other things that we have within K2 is the concept of our work list. Let me jump back to my home screen here real quick on my SharePoint site. And if you'll notice down below, we have an app part called K2 Work List. And the key thing here, as opposed to if you just think about regular SharePoint workflows, that we have a universal task list that shows me all the tasks that have been assigned to me regardless of site collection that I'm part of, regardless of version of SharePoint, and regardless of systems I'm integrating with. So you can see here that Roy actually has a lot of different workflows that have been assigned to him. And so any of these he can take part of. He can individually select a specific task, redirect it to somebody else if he needs someone else to work that task because he finds it's not applicable to him. He can also delegate out his task to have someone help him out with this task. I could also set my out of office on here if I need to. So in the event that I'm gone, I can go ahead and have all my tasks go to a specific person, or if there's any specific criteria, it can go to someone else instead. And then there's other things such as searching task items and bulk actioning tasks and so on. But the idea is that it's a one-stop place for me to go action all my tasks, and that way I don't have to jump around site collections or versions of SharePoint or even line of business information that I'm trying to complete. We can also take that one step farther. Let's say that I'm not even within the building at the office. I'm out mobile. I have my iPad or my iPhone, and I want to be able to action my task directly from those devices as well. So let's take a look at what that is on that. And so I'm actually sharing out a screen of my iPad right now. So what we're actually looking at is that same form that I filled out originally. Now we can actually take those forms outside of SharePoint and actually make them more user-friendly from a responsive design, branding approach, and make them look and feel how I would like. The interaction's still the same. There's no degradation as far as, if I select APAC, I can select Midwest. The cascading drop-downs still work. So you can still see that I see that information. I can take advantage of the actual device itself by using like voice to text and say, please review this item for me. And then that will put that in the form, so it'll let you really quickly type that out. And then I can go ahead and submit it directly from my mobile device as well if I want to initiate that. Now, there's nothing that has to be done from a smart forms perspective as far as making forms mobile friendly. All our forms will work across whatever device, and with using the responsive design themes that we provide out of the box, they'll always look appropriate on whatever device that you're using. Now, that's just from a form perspective. We also have native apps that allow you to do more things from a task management standpoint. So let me go ahead and log into our K2 mobile app, which you can find in the iOS store in this case, or the Windows marketplace, or even the Google Play Store. And we can see here that I received that same contract review for the one I just submitted. In this work list, once again, it's a list of all the tasks that have been assigned to me. I can see it broken down by filters of which one I can go to. I can select like the vendor contract one, since that's the one we're working with, and it'll filter those out. I can have different sorting and different things like that as far as importance and expiration dates. I can also go in individually to a task, see the actions that are if I want to go ahead and immediately approve those just by clicking a button to make it easier for a user. I have my redirection. I can add files and attachments and comments. Or if I want, I can flip over to the form itself to be able to review that form on the mobile device. Now, like I said, I don't have to do anything specifically on the device itself to be able to pull that up. There will just work across whatever device. And also the thing to take note is that all these different tasks can actually be marked as offline capable. And so what that means is that I can go ahead and view a task in offline mode. So if I'm not even connected to a network, it'll download all the content and data, allow me to even work on the forms if they have cascading drop-downs and be able to complete that particular form without being connected to a network. And that also applies to filling out new forms that maybe has lookup into other systems, because we allow it to cache data on those forms. So we've done a really great job of being able to make it easier for the user, whether they're online or offline, to complete or submit new processes. So we can see here now that I have some information on the form. It's tailored a little bit differently for this particular review process, just by displaying some read-only information. If there's any approved contracts, I can also view any attachments, which we've automatically created a PDF attachment down at the bottom to the user from the form we submitted. So we can create PDFs of any of our smart forms, and in this case, archive them to a SharePoint site. Or I could just simply approve this task from here, hit the submit button. It'll let me know that it's been submitted, and now it's gone away from my task list. One other thing, though, just from a mobile standpoint to point out is that, let me click over to another one that I have connected to another one, is that I mentioned we can complete our task from here. We can even take it further to allow even more capabilities within the form. So I have this, it's kind of like a CapEx process that I can flip over to the form itself. I can see information. I can flip over see my attachments, any comments that have been made. But also on the form itself, I threw on like if I wanted to do signatures on the actual smart form, I could go ahead and sign my name however I would like, then go ahead and approve my particular task on this proposal and submit that off. So once again, using different out-of-the-box controls that we have. So we have many different ones that are provided on the form itself. And then also I could switch over to my forms on my app, and these are all different forms that I have access to be able to kick off new processes or just filling out standard web forms that I might want to do. If I want to even go as far as maybe I have a new employee I'm onboarding within my organization, I can switch over to that, fill that out on my mobile device, and I'm ready to go. All right, so that's from a mobile standpoint. Just kind of flipping back from an end user perspective, I kind of showed you that end user approach from a K2 standpoint. One of the other things I'd like to point out is that we have this integration with SharePoint. We saw how I was able to go in this vendor contract. I click this new item. We see the form, but let's say that I just want to start creating dashboards for users to be able to interact with different applications. Maybe I want to see reporting. Maybe I want to be able to see my tasks, which is really a request that I see quite a bit now. And so let's just take it a step further. You can start seeing the robust powerfulness of the K2 smart forms themselves. So I'm going to flip over to some other dashboards that I have. And this first one we're taking a look at is once again built on our smart forms, but this is using something which I've built called my app portal. This app portal is something that I used, and it reuses different views that I built in my smart forms so I can quickly drag and drop those on forms that I want to display this information. And we can see on the left side is just different apps that I've given this user access to. In this case, I've logged in as Blake, as you can see in the upper right. And he could simply go in and log customer feedback, or onboard a new employee, submit a new purchase order. He has information to his task specifically in his work list. Once again, notice that we're not even in the SharePoint site anymore. It's just a dashboard for him to look at. He also has different reports that he could interact with. So if I want to go ahead and click on employee onboarding, see a breakdown of what it's taking per different step in there. This is around the processes, and then see maybe a breakdown per process, or see where a process is. I could do that as well. Or I could even make it even more granular to where I have a dashboard specifically for a specific process, in this case, an employee onboarding. So then now I can see different list of all my current customers that are being, employees that are being onboarded, what stage they're in. I can view who's completing work. I could also switch over to my task. I can see a breakdown of where my tasks are, where those are by process, anything that's overdue. I can have notifications that are sent to me that show that. And then I can even have other reports showing me, list of contractors, when their due date's approaching, if they've passed their due date as well, by showing that. And then I can drill in even further to employee information by process. And this is all being displayed in our smart form, so it's really easily accomplished through our smart form controls, and being able to see some of the out-of-the-box reports that we have that show any information that I want to see about a process, so that I can see anywhere from when a process starts to down to the users that interacted to what decision they made. And then finally, one other thing I wanted to point out from an end user perspective is something which we call our work desk that we're providing, which is a really quick way to get our, people up and running using K2's smart forms, is that it gives me a whole environment to be able to see different work desks that I've provided users. In this case, this is an energy work desk. On the left, I see a section for tasks. I see different apps I can interact with. I can see different dashboards, or I could switch more to this other one that's tailored to application work desk. So we can see over here I have a lot more apps I can interact with. Maybe I want to go to fill out a travel request. I have that particular environment to where I can see any travel request assigned to me, anything that's been submitted, all tasks have been assigned to me, or I could even just simply view reports about that travel request or kick off a new travel request as well. So these are some jumpstart ways to really quickly build out forms. Gives you an idea. All these are mobile friendly. We have many different themes that can be tailored or branded to your organizational colors. And all of that's, as Casey mentioned, a declarative approach from our forms platform. So I'm not coding anything. All the functionality that I've shown you as far as cascading drop-downs and doing lookups into other systems is just a bunch of configurations within the form itself by checking a box or deciding where I want to go. I'm not having to write jQuery or JavaScript or any .NET code to accomplish that. All right, so that's a lot of the end user perspective. What I'd like to do for the next couple minutes is just show you what it's like actually to build out everything I just was talking about. So what we're going to jump over to is now workflow design experience and also the forms design experience. And we're going to do this within the context of SharePoint itself. So maybe I have a specific SharePoint list that I want to build against. Maybe I want to build out a form, make it mobile friendly. Also build a workflow that goes through multi-step approval processes. And so what we're going to take a look at is, since I just showed you travel requests, let's stick within that same theme, since that goes over, most everyone knows what a travel request is, hopefully by this point. So I have a travel request demo list that we can see has several different fields within here of different types. And once you've added K2 to your SharePoint site collection, based upon your governance rules, you'll have the availability to click on this list ribbon and have access to our K2 application. And the first time you come into that, if you have the permissions to build out processes within K2, and based upon your governance rules that you've exposed to the user, they can go in and do. It gives them an example of what they want to do first. One of them being creating a new application, or maybe someone built out something similar and they want to deploy out a template within their organization, their particular list, to build out other processes. But we're going to start off by building out a brand new application. And when I click on that, we can see that we automatically, right off the bat, create a smart object around that SharePoint list, because that's how we work with data within K2. And we want you to be able to access anything within that list easily in a reusable format. So that's where we create a smart object off of that SharePoint list we were just on. Now, also, this is where we come in, and where I was showing you earlier where we place the SharePoint forms with our smart forms, I can come in here and just simply check I want to replace those, and it'll create a smart form for every new edit and display SharePoint form in this list that we're working with. In addition to that, I can go ahead and create a workflow against this list, and we can see that gives me two options here as far as how I want this workflow to get started. One is, do I want a user to fill out a form and then submit it, or do I want to even respond to a specific event within that list? So we can integrate with the SharePoint list as far as, do you want the items added, or if it's been updated, someone deleted an item in a list, maybe it's with a document library, someone uploaded document to kick off a approval review process. There's many different ways we can respond to those list or library events. So we'll just stick with the smart form is submitted. And then finally, we have a report section, which will automatically create you a reporting dashboard around the process that you're building, so you can see matrices around how that process is performing. So I can click OK, and that'll generate all those assets for me. Just from a time's sake, I'm going to jump back to a specific, this travel request demo one that I've already clicked the OK button. Just to show you a difference, though, is on that previous list, if I click a new item, we're going to see the basic SharePoint form that you would be accustomed to by coming into that list after you created one. After you click the OK button, what you're going to see is it's going to look kind of similar, but now what we've done is replaced the SharePoint form with our smart form. We threw in an attachment section that stores some documents for us, and we've also kind of changed some of the information up that you can fill out the interaction here. Now, it still looks very similar. It looks plain vanilla. So what I'd like to do is clean this up a little bit. One of them being is that I want to automatically grab who that employee is without having to have the user type it in. I also want to grab an account from another system that I store all my accounts. In this case, we'll just stick with Microsoft Dynamics CRM. And then also when they select account, have another section show up to show all that account information automatically in that form about that account, and just change every time I change that account. So how we do that now is I can jump over to the travel request demo, and I'm going to go ahead and jump back into that application. And this time when I come in, we're going to see all the assets that have been automatically generated by K2. So the first thing we're going to do is edit a view, because if you remember, I mentioned previously, is a form is comprised of one-to-many views, and that's how we work within our smart forms, since we're all about reusability. And I'm going to edit the view for the new form, since that's associated with that new item that we just clicked on earlier. So I'm going to check that out to myself, and I'm going to go ahead and open that form, which opens up our designer within the context of SharePoint. So keep in mind, this is using our engine just being surfaced up in SharePoint. And I see the canvas here. I can see what the view currently looks like. I can then come in here and just drag stuff around if I want to different fields. I have a list of all the different fields that are in the SharePoint list, including all my different controls that are out of the box within our platform. And as you can see, there's many, many different types of controls that I can just drag on, from attachments to even location controls to work with, if I want to find out where the user is on a form or something like that. But let's go back to change those fields I mentioned and just show you how easy that is to do. Things here I'm going to do the employee field. I'm going to switch that over and change that to just to be a data label, because that's just going to display information. And then the account field, I'm going to change that to a picker control, which is my favorite one, that will provide me a way to where I can type it in and it'll retrieve it, or I can do a search and find the account that I want. On the right side, we see the properties of that specific control. So I'm going to make two changes. One, only allow them to select one account, and two, to select my smart object. I'm going to go ahead and select my smart object, and within that smart object, I'm going to go to my CRM, which is what we were talking about, the line of business, or these could even be more user-friendly, just depending on your organization, how they name the interaction with line of business systems. I can see that this account is the one that represents all my customers and potential customers. So I'm going to go ahead and select that particular one, which we can see retrieves all the information from that account. And I only want them to select the account, search by the account name. So now I've wired up that control. As you can see, there's no coding or anything involved to do that. And then finally, on this employee data level, I just want to make sure that that information is populated automatically when that view loads. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our rules canvas. And this is how it drives the behavior of our views and forms within K2. Automatically, all these are created for me. So I'm just going to jump into one of them that was already created. And we have all these pre-configured rules that I just have to click to build out how my interaction, my form. So we're just going to do one extra step in here called transfer data. And I'm going to configure that particular step to go ahead, and when a user loads up the form, they're going to go ahead and we're going to pass over the display name to that employee label. So that's all I have to do. We've done that integration now. And finally, we're just going to jump over to the form itself and check that one out. And we're going to go ahead and edit that particular one. And we're going to see now a little bit different look than what we just saw with the view. We see a read-only approach, which I can now come in here and change different themes if I want, from a look and feel perspective. Or we're going to stick with this current theme. And I'm going to jump over to my reusable assets category. I have a views, and I have my CRM view that I've built many times. I'm going to just drag that over to my canvas, call that account details. And what I want it to do is not be visible when the form loads. And then finally, I'm going to go jump to my rules, where I'm going to add in a new rule to say when that control that we just changed on that new view, which happens to be that account picker control, when it's changed, we're going to go ahead and apply a specific condition, meaning we don't want to do a lookup on an account if no one's typed anything, because we don't want any errors. And then we're going to go ahead and do two things. We're going to show a view, and we're going to execute a view method. Also, one of the things I'll go ahead and throw in here is that I'm going to put a logical condition in here saying else I just want to go ahead and hide that view if they aren't selecting anything at that point. All right, so I just need to connect these really quick. So I'm just going to go ahead and say show the account view and hide the account details. And then on the account details, it already has logic automatically tied to it. So I can just choose the load method, and I just need to make sure both of my views talk to each other. So I just have to drag over the control onto that view, which happens to be, in this case, the control of that new view. And so we see the account picker. I can drag it over, finish that out, and now we're ready to test out my form. So we're going to go back to the SharePoint list. I'm going to click on that new travel request library. And now when I click that new item, we're going to see those changes that have been applied. Here's that account field. We're going to go ahead and do a search for anything with the letter A in that. We can see there's many different accounts. We'll go ahead and select City Power Light. And there's the information directly below here. Just to validate that information didn't, it goes away when I clear it. We can see it's gone. And let's just type in fourth copy, and then there's that information down below. One step further on that form, maybe I don't want it to sit in SharePoint. I want to expose it out on a mobile device. That web form actually has a URL. I can just click on that URL. Now we're outside of SharePoint. It doesn't look as good, so we'll go ahead and brand it to a different theme we have. And there we go. And the form still looks and behaves the same as we saw earlier. All right, last but not least, let's just jump into the workflow. I'm going to build out a really quick workflow to talk about just what it's like to actually experience building a workflow within K2. So let's go ahead and jump back here. So we're going to start building out workflow. Once again, this is going to open our workflow designer within the context of SharePoint, but it's using K2's workflow engine, not SharePoint workflow. So it allows us to really go above and beyond with going back and forth within workflows, going to multiple site collections in a process if I want to, because I can add documents from one site collection to another, or even versions of SharePoint, because we're not bound to any limitations within K2 workflow. So really quickly, we go from a left to right approach. We have some common activities across the top, and we have different categories that we can interact with, such as uploading documents, and even all the way as granular as adding document permissions as it's being updated. But let's go ahead and build out a really multi-step approval process that has some rules conditioning in there as well. So first off, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and drag on this user task, and I'm going to say that the first step when they submit the form, it's going to go to their manager for approval. I'm going to type what that is. I'm going to type in that they need to approve this request or reject this request, and I'll also say they can send for query. So as opposed to like SharePoint workflow where you have more of a yes/no approach, within K2 you can provide as many different options and outcomes that you would like for them to choose from. I'm just going to limit to 3, and I can, as you can see, put whatever wording that I want. It's going to default it to the edit form. I actually want it to go to a read-only form, which was already automatically created, so I'm going to just choose that particular form. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead and choose who I want it to go to. Out of the box, we already know who the manager is based off your Active Directory or Azure Active Directory structure. We can also tie in to SharePoint users and groups and SQL URM, and I can search between all those if I want. But let's just go ahead and stick with the manager for now. I'll drag that over and then notify them that they want to receive a work item, which takes me to my email screen, which I'll customize really quickly by typing in that this is a manager approval notification for employee, and then I'm going to grab directly that field that it's linked to on the form. There's my employee field. I can have that dynamically be part of my email. I can customize my emails with rich text and HTML if I want. These are some of the basic information that's already populated, so I'll just leave that, and we can see now that we're starting to go on throughout our workflow process. Now, let's say if they approve this, we want to go to finance team if it's over $5,000, or if it's not over $5,000, we'll just go ahead and finish off the workflow. So I'm going to drag in this one step that starts off by saying I have over 5,000, so we'll go ahead and manage that by adding 2 outcomes here, one of them being finance and complete. I'm going to edit that particular step, add a statement, which I'm going to grab if that total amount or the total cost from that one we just submitted happens to be greater than $5,000, then it's going to go down that path. All right, so we've now done that, and then now we've completed that. And time again, I've built out a finance approval step. I don't want to reinvent the wheel every time, so I can create templates within K2. I can come up to my templates library, choose my finance approval, drag that over. We can see it builds out the rest. Then I just need to hook it up to a couple things. One off, I want the same thing to happen that's up here down in the complete. So what I'll just simply do is highlight that, copy that over to this section, the same thing with the reject. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that down here. And then finally, for the query review, I'm going to jump back to reroute it back to the person within the workflow. I'm going to drag this user task down here. We'll call that query review. Just give them one option to complete their query review. In this case, I want to make sure they can edit the form because this is going back to the originator, notify them, finish that out. And then instead of going on in the workflow, I'm going to direct it back to the manager approval step because it has to get reapproved. So we can see it automatically draws a line back for me. And then the same thing with finance. If they find a problem with query, we need to go back to the originator before and go back through the manager. So we'll go ahead and edit that particular step as well. And we'll go ahead and choose the query review. And we can see now that it draws the line all the way over to the query review. So I've just now built out a multi-step approval process with some validation in there to validate that it goes on. And now I could publish this out for people to use. I can also go ahead and share this out for other people from a template perspective. So we're getting close to the top of the hour. I want to make sure we leave questions for anybody. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and open this up now for any questions that we might have.
Great. Thank you for that, Stephen, and thank you, Casey, for the initial introduction. So a few questions that have come through. One I'd like to ask as I was listening to the original or the early bits that Casey was talking about is you mentioned a hybrid scenario. Is it possible or even conceivable that customers who have some of their workloads in Office 365 and some of them on-prem, which seems to be a very common scenario these days, is it actually possible to build a business process that allows for them to initiate something in the cloud and complete it on-prem or even vice versa?
Absolutely, yes. So you can definitely say, let's just talk about a basic document approval process. Someone is in the cloud, they upload some documents, they need it approved, but then once they've completed, we need it to archive to an on-premise for storage. We can definitely do that interaction in between, or we could even just make it go back and forth between the two environments if you need to as well. So or as you said, we could start off the opposite way in the on-premise and go and push that out to the cloud.
Excellent. Okay, some questions that have come in during the presentation is someone just simply asked the question, Appit. Can you explain a little bit about what, I'm not sure what the details are around that, but they just put in Appit, so can you explain what Appit is?
Sure, I can touch on that. So we have two platforms available at K2. One is called Black Pearl and one is called Appit. Appit is specifically geared towards SharePoint users. So it works with SharePoint 2013. It's a cloud-based technology, so we host it for you. It's purchased on a subscription basis. And it means that all forms, workflow, et cetera, start and stop within the context of SharePoint, and then you use essentially similar to Black Pearl, how we have service brokers, we have those in Appit as well for the Microsoft stack, and then anything outside of that, you would use web services. But it's geared towards 2013, primarily Office 365 users, where Black Pearl is our enterprise platform, and it can be used with any version of SharePoint, as well as can work independent of SharePoint. Does that answer your question?
Great, thanks for that. We have another question that just came through. Jeff is asking, you mentioned querying Dynamics CRM in a smart form. Could you query Dynamics GP?
Sure. The easy answer is yes. As long as there's a way to get at the data, an API, a REST service, web service, etc., we can push and pull information from it.
What about querying SharePoint itself? If one of the built-in tasks that you have, and I noted you have quite a few of them there, just sort of out of the box, these objects you can drop on. But what about querying the SharePoint web services? Is that something you can do as well when the out-of-the-box stuff just doesn't quite cover the scenario?
Yes, so we have what we call an endpoint broker that allows us to consume web services, but from a SharePoint perspective, I've automated the entire approach as far as like maybe I want to query the user profile service within SharePoint. So I want to do some automation there for onboarding or just cleaning up different things. We can do that, whether it's search, collaboration, anything on any of the services that are exposed within SharePoint, we really quickly tie into those.
Okay, someone had a question about the dashboards that you were showing earlier in your demo, asking were those created with smart forms as well, or is that a custom dashboard implementation?
All the dashboards that I showed were built using our smart forms, and as I mentioned, there was no coding or anything involved. It was just all dragging and dropping and configuring those. The last one I showed, which was what I mentioned as a workspace, is something we provide out of the box. So you get that template, and then you can just simply use our management piece of the workspace to just plug it in the apps that you want in the forms that you're building.
Excellent. So one last question. User is asking, this all looks great, but could be a bit complicated. How hard is this to implement?
Casey, you want to take that?
Sure. I was just saying that it depends. So depends on the complexity of what you're trying to do. So the vast majority of K2 customers, I can tell you we have a couple of different service offerings. So number one, if you're in Appit, there is no installation because we host it for you. You simply are plugging in the URL of your Office 365 environment, your SharePoint environment. But typically as part of our service, we install the software for you. So we make all those connectivity to whatever version of SharePoint you're using. If you're using Salesforce or Oracle or SAP, that's included in that. And then we have really, really fantastic training. So the vast majority of our customers take training either we have self-paced, we have instructor-led. If you've got a large group where you're going to have a big, maybe call it 10 people that are going to be building out workflows and forms, we can come to you. And essentially our goal is to teach you to fish. So through training, and then we oftentimes for the first app, people utilize remote services. So what that is you can essentially buy the hour just to have access to our top professional services people. So it's very common that we help you on your first app. People buy a bucket of 40 hours, shall we say, and then they use it as they need. And I'll just use an example. Just like any other, net new tool, one of my groups built a really slick AP process. And their first one, which had a fair amount of complexity, took them about 3 months. Their second app, it took them a month because now they're used to the tooling, just like any other technology. They now kind of know where to click, how to build. And so once you start getting a cadence of using K2, I mean, you can roll these apps out extremely quickly. So, from a complexity standpoint, a lot of times it depends on how many different line of business systems you're going to be interacting with. And that's usually where IT gets involved, is you need someone who understands the underlying, taxonomy or security or database structure of, let's say, a custom banking application or of an Oracle or a PeopleSoft. But once you create those brokers or those smart objects, that's when someone who's non-technical, like Kimberly Clark has 500 people that are citizen developers. They are not in IT. They're building forms, they're building workflows, and that's pushed out to the business. Hopefully that gives you kind of a crawl, walk, run scenario.
That's fantastic. Great. Well, once again, I want to thank Casey and Steven for doing the presentation for us today. I'll close up with a reminder about the next meeting on February 25th. which is a date change for us to the last Thursday of the month from the third Tuesday. Be sure to go to dfwsharepoint.com to register for that. Also, you can join our group on Facebook, DFW SharePoint and Office 365 community. Look for us on Twitter at DFW SPUG. For more information on K2, visit k2.com. As one of our platinum sponsors, K2 is at most of our meetings and social events. Steven is usually there, so if you have further questions you'd like to ask them, feel free to join and come visit us once a month at our regular meetings to talk to the K2 folks as well as our other sponsors. Thank you, everyone. I also want to mention Unity, IT Unity, who is the host of our webinars. We couldn't do this without them. They have a number of webinars that you can go onto their website at itunity.com and view. There's usually a couple webinars going on every week, if not more often than that. Be sure to sign up for Jennifer Mason's regular webcast on the Office 365 Pulse and view the articles and other information from IT Unity that's available on their website at itunity.com. Follow them on Twitter at itunity01. Thank you all for participating today. We very much appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Everyone have a good day.